Good morning. Welcome to the ERA's webinar regarding Global Harmonized System for the classification and labeling of chemicals. We have some information we want to share with you today, and by the number of attendees that we have here today, there's over 170 attendees, so this looks like to be a very popular topic. Today we'll be covering the important aspects of the Global Harmonized System, or GHS, and how it applies to the ERA product family. My name is Mitch Fonda, and I head up all of compliance and also not only GHS compliance, but also other product stewardship compliance, as well as trade compliance for all of Waters and all of its companies such as ERA. So without further ado, we should start. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be covering some implementation highlights of GHS. Some of you may know this, some of you this may be new to you. The label requirements, some example of ERA GHS labels, go over the components of the safety data sheets, how to obtain an ERA safety data sheet, and then how to contact us for further information. So if we look back to where GHS came from, GHS was first published in the Purple Book in the early 2000s. Today we're on revision 6, which was released in 2015, and some countries such as New Zealand adopted the Purple Book way back in the early 2000s as soon as it was published, because they were already headed that way. The intent of GHS is really there's two big items. The first one is to protect human health and the environment as chemicals and chemical-related products are transferred and distributed around the globe, and also to facilitate global trade. There's depending on what report you read, sometimes there's you see information that's put out there that there's about $1 trillion worth of chemical and chemical-related products that are distributed around the world in global trade. So the system wrote back in the early 2000s in the Purple Book proposed standard proposed that are their standard. Yep. You know what? So I'm sorry, everyone. Just noticed that I'm going to back up one screen quickly. So there's the course outline. My apologies for that. And then we're here on the highlights. So we talked about the Purple Book, and we talked about the original intent being protect human health and the environment, and to facilitate global trade. And then we have the last bullet here is really that this Purple Book was to propose a standard way of communicating chemical hazards via product labels and also safety data sheets. And you're going to know that, at least for the people in the United States who are listening, that the word material is left off of there, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. So when GHS is implemented into a country, the countries who adopt GHS are really free to adopt these elements in the best way that they see fit. There's different versions of the Purple Book. So you know, there's China's on version is on one version, United States is on a second version, a different version, and there's other countries on other versions as well. So this begins, what we're going to talk about is sometimes GHS can be unharmonized in that different countries have different requirements and they can all enforce them locally. So that's one of the things that not only ERA and Waters look to on how to solve this issue is we look to how do we make sure that we understand what the globe is doing from a GHS perspective and how we can best serve our customer base, the people on the phone here, to ensure that we give the best possible information out there on GHS. There's differences on how substances can be classified. There's different pictograms for the same substance. For example, in Europe and other countries, they use the pictogram that looks at environmental hazards, where the United States does not. So that's one very specific example. And then there's additional categories that some countries have. And then what we try to look at very, very closely is not to have any conflicting label information and put all that information on the labels and the safety data sheets for you, our customer. So some of the markets that we already have implemented, we have Japan, European Union, the United States. We're working on the other major countries that have implemented GHS. And one note here that not all countries have implemented GHS. So if you take a look at the country of India, India is thinking about it. They have other regulations on the books that look at things that are similar to GHS, but they have not implemented the GHS Purple Book. One second while we look to one second, we have some technical difficulties here. We're taking a lecture. I'm going to mute just for a second. My apologies. My apologies. We're back. Sorry, there was just a technical difficulty we ran into about how our computer was hooked up. So, ready to go back to what we were talking about. Again, countries are free to adopt the elements of GHS how they see fit. It leads to many different countries have many different requirements for their GHS labeling and also their safety data sheets. So on the label requirements, so we're going to talk about two different pieces for GHS. On the label requirements, we're going to start with that first. There are specific requirements. Again, these requirements can vary country by country. Although there are country variations, in general, all GHS labels must contain a signal word, pictograms, hazard statements, and precautionary statements. We're going to go into each one of those to take a look at that with specifics. So the signal word, it's either warning or danger. It's for a user to quickly denote the degree of hazard of the item that you have present. Danger is a higher hazard than warning, and it must appear on the label immediately adjacent to the pictograms. We're going to go to the pictograms in just a second, but as you can see by the red arrow, where that for this specific ERA product, where that danger comes into play next to the 3 pictograms just to the right, and that meets the requirements of being immediately adjacent. Immediately adjacent can be on different sides, but it has to be within that immediate vicinity of those pictograms. The pictograms, this is another part that is a basic for all labels. There are 9 of them. As you can see, they run the gamut of hazards. The warning sign is for general warnings. You'll see that often by itself. Those are things that have just general hazards. And then it runs through explosive, corrosive, acute toxicity, chronic toxicity, flammable, reactive or explosive, compressed gas. And here's that environmental impact that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So although that there are 9 pictograms here, each country, as they classify their chemicals or their preparations, will have different applications of these pictograms in their sets of regulations throughout the globe. So the hazard and precautionary statements are the next piece that are on the labels, and you see the two red arrows in the bottom right-hand corner. If we take a look at the first ones, those are the hazard statement. Those are the hazard statements. Brief information about the hazards. They're standardized with categories 1 through 4, and they're related to physical hazards in some geographies. Again, here's another difference. They can also relate to environmental impact. So let's go back to our ERA label that we've been looking at. So we have regulated volatiles. It's catalog part number 840. We have the danger warning there on the bottom. We have our pictograms, and just to the right we have our hazard statements, and below that we have our precautionary statements. Sometimes the hazard and precautionary statements are known as H&P phrases, as some people like to talk about them. The difference is that the precautionary statements look at handling and storage conditions and provide some very limited emergency response or first aid information on there. So you can see that these two sets of explanations, or the hazard statements and the precautionary statements on the specific ERA label, give two different types of information, and it gives complete information, and it's all on one label that will be applied to the ERA product. So just to give you a bigger example of some of the other labels here. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you have the catalog number that we've been talking about in the last few slides, catalog number 840. Up above it is just another label. On this one, you'll know that on the New Jersey EPH and soil, this is a United States label. This is applicable to the OSHA hazard communication standard. So we have our warning word up above the single pictogram for this particular product, and then we have our hazard and precautionary statements for that particular item. Now you'll notice that the one on the bottom, 840, and the one on the top immediately above that, they say different things, and these are all related back to the classification of those specific chemicals. On the right-hand side, even though this is not an ERA product, it's a waters product, and this is an example of a European Union compliant label. So the label on the left is a product for waters, which is called Accutag Ultra LUNA. You notice again, a familiar theme is arising here. We have the signal word, we have the two pictograms, and then we have our hazard and our precautionary statements. The thing that you'll notice about the European Union is that there are numbers in front of each one of the statements. That is a very good example of a very particular difference between the United States labels on the right and the EU labels on the left. The EU specifically states under their REACH regulation, under their classification and labeling of products, that those hazard numbers and precautionary numbers must accompany the statements on all labels as well as the safety data sheets. So again, there's a country variation, and these variations go on from country to country. So particularly for small containers, much like some of the products that come from ERA, some countries have exemptions for small containers where there is very limited information on there. For those customers that are in the United States, there is no exemption in the United States. United States OSHA states that you must put a label with appropriate information on the small vial, and there is a limited amount. So it's the name, the part number, a statement that says the full labeling information for this product is provided on the outside package, a telephone number of the manufacturer, and then the pictograms and the signal word. And here are two examples here. So the full GHS information that would be on the outside of the package would be what we saw on the previous slide here. So say you were picking up an ERA product and you saw this on the outside, one of these labels on the outside of the product. On the inside, on the very small containers, you would see these, quote, abbreviated GHS labels. In the United States, this is mandatory. OSHA has presented two letters of interpretation regarding this, and they are very emphatic about this happening. And in other countries, there are exemptions that are different than the United States. So just beware for those of you who do business in different countries that there are some differences here. So that's labeling. So labeling has to have specific trigger words. They also have pictograms, hazard statements, and precautionary statements. Now, all that information has to match with the safety data sheet. And as you'll know that it's no longer called the material safety data sheet, it's just called a safety data sheet. Part of GHS, and even before that, they were looking to harmonize this across the globe. So if you're talking about hazard identification in Section 2 in different countries, then everyone is looking at Section 2 and seeing hazard identification. So there are 16 sections. We'll go over those in just a second. Here comes some more specific country requirements. Certain countries require information in these different sections. Label requirements are in Section 2, must match to product labeling, and you'll see one here for, goes back to that, that New Jersey EPH and soil that we had looked at previously. And then some countries have made some sections optional. Here's another country variation, like in the United States, Section 14 is optional. What ERA does, and so does Waters, is because we use the same system, is we fill that out always. And we give our customers a complete 16-section safety data sheet for all the countries in the world. Okay, so in the safety data sheet, there is a volume of information. Here are the 16 sections. It runs the gamut from simple identification to first aid measures to handling and storage, toxicological information, and some ecological information as well. So if you were in the United States, or if you were in Canada, or if you were in China, Japan, or Germany, you would see, even though they may be in different languages, they are in, each one of those would have, under GHS, would have 16 sections. And at this point in this presentation, you may say, oh my gosh, there's a lot of information, there's many countries, variations, there's all sorts of languages. How does ERA and how does Waters keep up with this? Well, we realize that this is extremely important. We take this very, very seriously for the care of human health, the environment, not only in our own operations, but also you being our customers. And what we do is we work with a expert third-party provider who does this all for us. And they keep all this up to date. They understand all the country requirements. It took us a while to vet this company out and make sure that they have the right solution for ERA and Waters. And they keep this up to date. And that's going to come into play as we show you how to obtain your safety data sheets for the products that you purchase from ERA. So for ERA, there is a shortcut. It's www.eraqc.com/SDS, or you can visit the resources section on the ERA website, and we'll show you here is that you just go to the left-hand part of the screen, shows the ERA main website. Under resources, when you click on resources, the drop-down menu at the bottom says safety data sheets. You click on that, and it'll ask you to enter in your product number. You can select your country, you can select your language, and then you click search, and it will bring it right up. So that's how you bring up those safety data sheets there. If for some reason that you have an inquiry or you would like to ask a question for ERA about the safety data sheets or the labels, we have a mailbox set up, and that's sdsinfo@eraqc.com. This is looked at every single day by the staff, and we respond as soon as possible. Some questions may take a little bit longer to answer than others, but what we can do also for this webinar, since there's a lot of people on the call, if we don't specifically get to your question, you can also send your question to this sdsinfo@eraqc.com mailbox, and we can get back to you with an answer to your question, or at least get you the information that you are seeking about GHS and ERA products. So just to let you know that this is really for the ERA products, but we wanted to also show you that Waters itself has the same setup. So in our support library on waters.com, there's also safety data sheets, and the reason why this is important is because we use one system for all. So we have, it's not just a unique ERA solution that we're talking about today. It's really the corporation's solution, and it has the weight of the corporate entity behind it, and this is why we can say very, very well that this is one of the better solutions that we've seen out there. We also have an email inquiry for specific about Waters products, and then we mentioned before about the specific mailbox for ERA products as well. So with that, we've kind of given you a lot of information today. Is the GHS itself is intended as a hazard communication harmonization effort throughout the world. A note of caution is that there are requirements that can vary country by country, either whether it's the revision of the Purple Book or it's some local requirement that a country feels that it needs to have on either the label or the safety data sheet. Again, this is why we go to a third party who keeps track of all that for us. And when you go on to the SDS site for ERA products, that safety data sheet will give you the most up-to-date copy there is. Behind the scenes, what you don't see is there's an interface with the data that drives all of this, and there's not a week goes by that we don't update part of it. So we're always updating these items to make sure that you have the most up-to-date safety data sheet. So the labels in the safety data sheet have the hazard words, the trigger words, the pictograms, and the hazard and precautionary statements, of which you've seen. There's another example. This is the New Jersey EPH and soil label here. And then the ERA SDSs, again, are on the website in the most up-to-date version. And then if you need to contact us, there are, you have the mailbox here on the SDS info at eraqc.com. So I know there's a lot of information, and we want to make sure that we have time for some questions, and to make sure that we have. So with that, just 1 second, we're taking a look at some of the questions. Okay. So we apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning of our presentation. Hopefully that we got back on track and got back on track and made sure that we continued on with the broadcast. So I don't see any questions right now for the webinar, but we encourage you that any question that you do have. Oh, we have one come up. There's a question here: is it possible to get our country's language for safety data sheets? Yes. So what we do have is, if you look at, especially for in the European Union, we have the major languages for the European Union in there, and you can search on the website by the version. So say I wanted an EU version of the product in German, you just check off the European Union button, and then you can check off it in German. You'll see the German version come up there. If for some reason you don't see your language in there, we have 21 languages in there now. If you don't see your language version in there, please send us a request, and we can take a look at that. So 21 languages obviously does not span the entire globe. So there's another question here about a very specific language. again, send that request to sdsinfo@eraqc.com, and we can address you on your specific need personally with you and get you an answer as quickly as possible. Okay. So there's and I'm taking these in somewhat in order as they're coming in. When is the new Purple book coming? Well, version 6 was just published in 2015, and if we're on version 6 in 2015 already, one would take a very good guess and be very accurate to say that I would not doubt if version 7 would be coming in 2016. It all depends on what the United Nations does with their timetable and getting the new Purple book revised. Okay. There's another question here: is am I required to keep a copy of all previous MSDSs or SDSs for the same material? There's depending on the country that you sit in, there are requirements to hold on to safety data sheets for your particular products for a certain amount of time. And again, that varies from country to country, so you have to be very cautious about where you sit in the world and how long that record retention requirement sits there for. Okay. There's a question about secondary containers not classified under GHS, and some of the processes that may be performed after that. If you're in the United States, there's certain requirements there. What you have to do is you have to take a look at what my advice would be, or our advice would be, is to take a look at that material that you have, and as it undergoes any processing, how it may be transformed or changed, and what that hazard would be on the other side. So, and that analysis has to be done on site by the person who holds on to that piece of that product or that chemical solution. So it takes some understanding of what your processes are, and I would do your processes an injustice to trying to guess about what that may be on the outcome. So certainly if you have a question about our products themselves, you can send us that request, and we can try to provide you some more information. Okay. There's another question here about products that do not require a safety data sheet, and what we try to do is what our aim is to provide you a document for all products, and for example, for some of the TOC standards that we make do not require a safety data sheet in the majority of the countries that we send that to, and we'll give a document for that particular region, say in the United States or Europe, quoting the regulatory citation about why it's not required, and then give it to you, and that's through our documentation. There's another question here about the presentation itself. As someone who may have come a little bit late or got tied up in a meeting or something. So we will have this, this is being recorded and posted onto the ERA website for those of you who want to view this at a later date. There's another question here about import authorities, and they want to see any documents from ERA about the contact information of the company who issued the document. What we're doing is in the beginning, that's a great question. What we did in the beginning is some of the documents for the non-hazardous documents, we're trying to put the name and the address of the company on the bottom with some contact information. On the safety data sheets, we also have, on those safety data sheets, we have all the names, the name and the address and the phone number of ERA. So those are on there. Some of the non-hazardous statements that we have, we're going back retroactively and fixing all those too, so they have the same information that the safety data sheets have on them. So in the interest of time, we're going to come to a closure. For those of you who may not have a question or think of a question later, again, we encourage you to go to sdsinfo@eraqc.com, pose your question, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible on your question. And we very much appreciate you listening to the webinar today, and also look for the recorded copy of this on the ERA website. And as always, we also appreciate you buying ERA products, and if there's any other questions that we can answer, please feel free to ask them. So thank you very much, and we will catch you on another webinar. Thank you and good day.